Recording started.
So good evening. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, students. I would like to welcome you to our live webinar for the Fall D session of Creation Studies. My name is Kathy Griffin, and I'm the subject matter expert for Creation Studies. And joining me is Dr. David DeWitt. He's the chair of the Biology and Chemistry Department for Liberty. He's also the director of the Center for Creation Studies, and he's the creator of our course. So I'll be facilitating the event tonight, and Dr. DeWitt will be leading our discussion. So this is the third synchronous moment we've held for Creation Studies. Previously, we had a review session for the class that may be helpful to you in preparing for the final exam. And last term, we had a session titled Creation Arguments People Use But Shouldn't. So this webinar may be useful for you for writing your Week 7 interview paper responses. But if you haven't already received them, you should be receiving links to these recorded webinars this week, so you'll have access to those. And in addition, the webinar tonight we're recording, so you'll be able to listen to that if you missed it live. So tonight we're going to be discussing human origins, specifically evolution arguments for human origins. Dr. DeWitt's done some extensive research in this area, so I'm excited to hear what he's going to share with us tonight. If you have any questions during the webinar, please send them to me either using the question and answer chat box on the WebEx screen, or you can email them to me and I'll get them through my email. So at the end, any questions you have, I'll be asking Dr. DeWitt the questions for you, and we'll discuss them. So Dr. DeWitt, would you open us in a word of prayer?
Certainly. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the gift of your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. And Lord, thank you also for your word. Lord, you've created us in your image, just as you've told us in the Bible. And Lord, this area of human origins is one that's really critical in the origins debate, but also is very confusing. And so, Lord, please use the information that we discussed to help clarify issues and questions that students have regarding human origins in particular. Lord, we give you the praise and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Yeah. So, human origins is a very confusing area. And I think evolutionists like to keep it confusing. So hopefully our discussion tonight will clarify some of the issues and also really cement a creationist worldview regarding all of the hominid fossils. And I thought for a good way to start the discussion is actually just hearing straight from the evolutionists and what they say. Many of you may have seen or heard about the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate, and I have a clip where Bill Nye was specifically talking about human origins, and so this will be the main talking point for going over this subject. I hope the sound will work. I don't know if it's going through the computer or through the phone, so if I got a problem, then I can mute it from my end. So here goes.
These are fossil skulls that people have found all around the world. It's by no means representative of all the fossil skulls that have been found, but these are all over the place. Now, if you were to look at these, I can assure you not any of them is a gorilla, right? If, as Mr. Ham and his associates claim, there was just man and then everybody else, there were just humans and all other species, where would you put modern humans among these skulls? How did all these skulls get all over the earth in this extraordinary fashion? Where would you put us? Well, I can tell you we are on there, and I encourage you, when you go home to look it up.
I was so mad. I was watching the debate live in DeMoss Hall. We had like 800 students in the room, and I was so mad when I saw that, because I could see how purposeful he was in trying to be confusing. Right? He had all of these what he called extraordinary skulls, but if you look at the chart, the first thing that jumps out is they're kind of all over the place in terms of their orientation. Some are complete, some are incomplete. This one is represented just as a jaw. We've got some partial tops of skulls. We got just the face. Some are facing right, some are facing left, some are facing the front. They're also not to size, and they're not labeled by what type of hominid they are, so Neanderthal or Homo erectus. They're labeled by the name that was given to the skull. So this chart, just when it comes up, it's a jumbled mess, and it adds to the confusion that people have. And this was really a snow job. So what we'll be doing is looking at the individual skulls and making sense out of them. And when you actually look at them from a creation perspective, it really will all come together.
You know, Dr. DeWitt, it looks to me, if you go back to the last slide, it looks to me like they're arranged from the top left, like they're arranged in like small to like large, almost like you can imagine that it's the evolution from a chimp to a human, you know, that they're gradually getting bigger and the size of the brain's getting bigger and until you reach human. From my perspective, I think that's kind of, it looks like how they're arranged to represent something like that.
It does kind of look like there's a progression, but where they really pulled a fast one is, for example, this one here, this skull that's Herto versus this one here that's Cro-Magnon. See how they look like they're pretty close to the same size?
Right.
Well, I actually have replicas of those two skulls, and they are not close. The Herto skull, which is supposed to be thousands and thousands of years older, is bigger. It's actually an extremely large skull.
So they're not even they're made to look like they're progressing, but they're not. But in reality, they're not.
Right. And so that's what's not fair. And compared to this one, 3733, see how this one looks like it may be a little larger? It's actually quite a bit smaller. So I don't know where he got, well, I got it from Matt Cartmill, but I don't know what Cartmill was trying to do with this picture. Because as we'll see, it's not in any type of like what you would expect as a real sequence. Plus, I know that this one they're showing you the bottom of the skull. I mean, this was really this was a real fast one. This one they're showing you the back. But see, in the 30 seconds that it's on the screen, like, you're not even going to be able to, like, pick up on that kind of thing.
Right, because it's so fast.
Right. And because of the labeling by the names, I know what a lot of these are, and we have a lot of the replicas, but like harder to remember that, say, 1470 is Homo rudolfensis, because it's harder to catch that because he doesn't like tell you what the classification is. So some of the challenges in studying hominid fossils were previously in the course we've contrasted empirical or operational science versus historical science. And when you're dealing with fossil remains and hominids in particular, right, this is historical science, because we aren't dealing with things in the present that we could measure or compare. There are no controls. We're doing forensics, really, when we're looking at the skulls. It's forensics, or crime scene investigation in a way. There's also an extremely limited number of fossil humans that have been found. So it said all of the human fossil remains could fit in a single coffin. There's that little to go on. And so it took me a while, but after going through this a bit, I could recognize the skulls because there's only a handful that you really have to know. But it's intimidating when you get started. The critical thing from a creation perspective are the dating methods that are used to say how old the fossils are. We've previously in the course discussed some of the limitations to radiometric dating, but the human fossils are dated not by radiometric dating, but by what other associated fossils are found, and then where those may in other locations have a radiometric date that gets assigned to it. So it's kind of a consecutive assumption. The fossils are are essentially never complete. They're always fragmentary. They're missing pieces, and even if you have all of the pieces, you still have to assemble it because it's going to be crushed into a bunch of pieces. We also don't know the exact range of variation. You have a picture of a female gorilla and a male gorilla. These individuals are the same species. They obviously interbreed. That's how you get baby gorillas. But they're clearly different. So the male gorilla has this large sagittal crest and much larger brow ridge and much larger canine teeth. And so the question really is, when we're looking at some of these Australopithecine fossils, scientists try to split them into different categories, Anamensis or Sediba, but we really can't tell necessarily whether it's just the range of variation within the same species, because there can be a wide range. Just if you think about the people that you know, just the way that their head is shaped, right? Maybe they have a high forehead, maybe they have a slightly sloped forehead, maybe they've got a round face, maybe they've got a long face. So there really is a lot of variation. They don't have, I just clicked on page. The fossils don't come with labels, and they don't come with date stamps. And so the classification of what a fossil is, what type it is very subjective and often a matter of debate. So it's also frequently done by comparison. So you'll say this skull is more robust than that one. It just means it's bigger. But there's not an exact measurement as to say this is what makes it. Like if it's in this range or the other range, it's just very subjective. So that's a little bit of background. So when it comes to the skulls that were in Bill Nye's picture, right? They were in no particular order, either by type or by date, as we'll see. But the types that are shown, some are classified as modern humans, some are classified as Neanderthal, some Homo erectus, and then we also have a few habilis, Rudolfensis, and then several Australopithecines. Now, just understand where we have these different classification names. It's because there's a particular feature that is said to make it that, okay? So, like if we think about different racial or ethnic groups, right, we tend to see individuals with narrow eyes in Asia. So it's a similar type of thing to say if you have an occipital bun, that's a protrusion in the back of the skull. Well, that's a characteristic that says it's Neanderthal. Okay, so they're looking at just some special feature to say it's this type or a different one. Okay, and it's just a name that people are giving. Okay. So it's not something that necessarily exists in reality. It's just a human name that a human's assigned the name. Okay, are you following? Hello.
Great, I'm still here. Are you still there?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna look at how they're showing these different groups of on Bill Nye's slide, and also then why it's critical for evolution that they be really different. Okay. First, we'll look at the ones that are clearly defined as modern humans. And again, this is just there's not anything intrinsic to the skull that makes it say, well, this is a Homo sapien, this is modern man. It's we're giving it the name because we want to. It's why do we divide anything into a classification system? That's what we're talking about. Okay, so by the strictest definition of what makes a modern human, the Cro-Magnon is the standard. So if you say this defines what a modern human is, a high forehead and a large cranial capacity with no real brow ridge. But you'll notice on some of the skulls, like in particular this one here, there is a slight brow ridge in the skull 5. Herto also has somewhat of a brow ridge, but the cranial cranial capacity is large. And so because the cranial capacity is large, they said, well, this is a modern human. Okay. They'll also look at features on teeth to set the classification. Okay. But all of these...
Recording started.
Uh-oh. Did we lose something?
Sorry, no, in the middle of all of this, my computer shut down randomly. So, but I think it says 20 minutes, so I don't know if it stopped recording in the middle or not, but everyone has still heard everything you said, so it's okay.
Okay, all right. So all of these are considered modern humans, and all would have been able to interbreed, and really all are descendants of Adam and Eve. So just because they have a funny shaped skull doesn't make them not human. Okay. As far as the evolution dates, and this is where some of the problems come up. Okay, so the Cro-Magnon is dated at 30,000. We go 100,000. Then we've got some that are 160,000. But then we've got 120 to 80,000, and then a Thali that's 200,000. Okay. So, and again, this is based on dates that are assigned to associated fossils to the human remains. Okay. It's not a radiometric date. Okay. But we've got a really wide range here of anatomically modern humans. I wanted to show these skulls as well. These are all modern humans, but they're from different parts of the world, and you can see a lot of variation. So we don't have a brow ridge, we have a high dome forehead, but here we have a real sloped forehead and a brow ridge. Here we have a bit of a brow ridge. This is just normal variation. And although we don't see very many people that have this shape of skull anymore today, they were regular people in the past. So moving up to the next row, this is where we get to ones that are classified as Neanderthal or Homo heidelbergensis. These have wider variation in terms of some of the features of the skull, but as they're laid out, they're not in an order. Okay. But Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis, these also are descendants of Adam and Eve. Neanderthals, as you'll recall from lecture, used fire, hunted and trapped prey. They also cared for their injured. They made musical instruments. They made jewelry. But most critically, they buried their dead with rituals, implying belief in an afterlife. This burying the dead is something that humans do. Okay. Also, we have recent evidence where they sequenced the Neanderthal genome and have found a large number of people have, quote, Neanderthal genes, showing that humans and Neanderthals interbred, which reinforces that they really are fully human descendants of Adam and Eve, just like us. But the chart of the skulls, okay, you'll see several on the top. The first are heidelbergensis, but then we've got some Neanderthals, and then we've got another heidelbergensis. And the dates and I researched all of these dates from the evolutionist literature. So these are the dates that evolutionists assigned to them. This is not, I didn't pull this out of the hat. So you see the dates go up and down. They're kind of all over the place. And we've got some overlap. As when you look at another row, we've got several Erectus. We've got several Erectus specimens. Some Heidelbergensis, some Ergaster. Ergaster is the name that's given to Homo erectus specimens from Africa. So one of the key ones for Ergaster is 3733. Okay. The 1470 skull, that is Rudolfensis. Okay. But we're going to focus on Heidelbergensis, Erectus, and Ergaster. Okay. This several have ambiguous classification, and that's because they were habilis, Rudolfensis. They kind of don't know what they are, and we'll touch base back on that issue. But these are the types and the dates. And one quick thing to point out, right here we have Homo erectus with a date range of 70,000 to 250,000 years ago, which completely overlaps what we saw with modern humans that went up to 200,000 years ago. It overlaps the Neanderthals, and it overlaps Heidelbergensis, and it's younger than some of the Heidelbergensis. Okay. And then we've got other Erectus that's going back 1.5, 1.8 million years. Okay. That's the 3733, 1.8 million years. Okay. So from this point, KNM ER992, their Gaster, everything that was below that on the chart, everything below that on the chart is actually human. But we've got a few ambiguous, habilis, and Rudolfensis. Okay. So the Australopithecines are on the top. And this is kind of funny because the couple of these 17,000, these that have a P in front of them, originally when those fossils were found, they were called Australopithecus. They were considered robust Australopithecus. But then scientists decided to rename them Paranthropus. Now I remember what's a good example of what I was talking about in terms of classification and how people name things. Cassie, do you remember when Pluto was a planet? Because I do.
I remember it very well in my childhood.
And I'm still kind of mad that it's not. Well, there isn't anything that changed about Pluto, right? Our definition of a planet, some astronomers changed the definition to exclude Pluto. Okay. Then they made a new, I think it's planetoid or something like that. They made up a new name. Okay. So originally, when some of these were found, they were called Australopithecus, and then some scientists decided that, no, it's not Australopithecus, it's Paranthropus. So they just changed the name. Okay, and it really, I think, adds to the confusion. Okay, so when we're talking about these are all extinct apes. The Australopithecus or Paranthropus. Okay. The dates for these go down and up, so they're not in an order by what type they are or by what date they are, but these definitely are not humans. The ones on the top and then a couple on that second row. Okay. The fossils that have been found and the more recent fossils that have been found have really caused a lot of trouble for evolutionists, much more so than creationists. It's fitting very well with a creationist perspective. Okay, so for one thing, we have the problem with the overlapping dates. So as you can see, we've got so much overlap between Homo sapien, that's modern man, Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, and Erectus. We've got so much overlap in this, it becomes difficult to say that they really are separate or that they did not interbreed. There's evidence that they did. But from an evolution perspective, they need multiple types because you've got to get humans from a chimp-like ancestor, okay? And so you've got, so you take a couple of million years, but we've got to have an evolutionary progression. We've got to be going from one type that was a common ancestor to a new type. And it gets kind of messed up if you're missing types. Well, this, let me back up to that first chart. One thing in particular that has messed up the evolutionists is the Demancey skulls. Okay, the Demancey skulls. There's several of them. They have a huge range of variation in terms of the skull morphology. And what the Demancey skulls really show is that whether you're talking about Neanderthal, Erectus, Heidelbergensis, modern man, they're all subsumed within the variation of the Demancey skulls. So those skulls, they're found in the same place. They have a wider variation than you see in Erectus, Neanderthal, and modern humans, okay, which reinforces that they're all part of the same kind. They're all descendants of Adam and Eve. Does that make sense?
It does. You know, when I was thinking when you were going through all the different categories, I was thinking how important your worldview is. I mean, I think this really highlights the importance of your worldview, because if you're coming from an evolutionist worldview, then you're going to be looking for categories to lead up to humans. And so they've made these categories trying to show progression to come to modern humans. But it's very confusing because the dates don't always work. And then you get like the example you were just giving, you get a skull that they have lots of different variations. And so it messes them up because they're not fitting into the categories that they've made, and they have to keep recategorizing, when really the simplest answer is just that they're not different categories, and that perhaps in different times in the past there have been different genetic qualities that have caused differences in skulls, but it's all from the same genetic pool that we've come from, from Adam and Eve.
Right, and even we see, like, one example I sometimes use is I went to Monticello several years ago, And I'm glad I didn't have to sleep in Thomas Jefferson's bed because my feet would have hung way off the end. Because people today are so much taller than they were a couple hundred years ago. And so it's just through the course of history, there can easily be changes in some of the traits, but it's not that there's a different kind. But evolutionists have to see, they're looking for the missing link. They're looking for the missing link, and so they have to have these different types. It was also interesting to me that most of the important recent fossils were not included on his chart, like Ardipithecus and Sahelanthropus. Those are completely absent from his chart. And those too are posing some new challenges. So let's go back to what Nye said originally, right? He said, these are fossil skulls that people have found all around the world. It's by no means representative of all the fossil skulls that have been found, but these are all over the place. That's true. We find them all around the world, but it's not true that they are common. Human fossils are really the rarest of fossils. I think it's about 90% of all fossils are marine organisms, the fossils from the ocean. And even dinosaurs, as popular as they are also quite rare. So Tyrannosaurus rex, which is one of the most popular, I think at most there are like 11 T-Rex fossils that have been found. So it gives you a sense of how uncommon a lot of these things are. Nye said, I can assure you that not any of them is a gorilla. That was true. None of the fossils that were shown were a gorilla skull, but that was really deceptive, because in him saying none of them is a gorilla, the people listening to that would think that none of the skulls were of an ape, but that wasn't what he said. That was kind of the takeaway message. And I'm pretty sure that he did that on purpose. And just saying none of them is a gorilla, people would think that there wasn't an ape. But the Australopithecine really is an extinct ape. Okay, so I think he was trying to mislead people about that. He asked, where would you put modern humans among these skulls? Where would you put us? By the strictest definition, modern human is just the Cro-Magnon, the last one. But really, humans, descendants of Adam and Eve, would include all of the Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, and Erectus. So at least 37 of the skulls were us. At least 37 of them were human, which is a lot more than what he was implying in the way that he presented that chart. It came across, if you're just watching, it would come across that, well, maybe it's just the last one, and all of these other things are completely different intermediates. I think a lot of people would have thought that when they watched that debate. He also said there are many more than two kinds. That's true because he has it 5 at the most. At the most, there are 5, and 5 is more than 2. You might debate whether 5 is many more than 2. But if you do the most splitting possible, we've got humans through Homo erectus. We've got Australopithecus. We've got Paranthropus, but again, that may just be variation of Australopithecus. We've got Rudolfensis, if that's really separate from Australopithecus, which I do think it is. And then we've got Habilis, and that is anybody's guess what that is. Evolutionists hotly debate whether Habilis really is a kind of anything, because that one's just really a mess. So if you're generous, there are 5 different kinds. So Kathy, do you think 5 is many more than 2?
I don't, but I think that what he was really implying was that there were more than 2 kinds of, like, because he said that Ken Ham says there's humans and there's other than humans, and that's what he means, there's 2 kinds. And I really think there still is only 2 kinds, because there's humans and there's non-humans. There aren't humans, partial humans, transitional humans, kind of humans, and then chimps. So yeah. I think that really there are 5 different groups, if you want to call them groups, but I still think it's just humans and non-humans.
Yeah, and see, you can split it that way. You can, that there are 2, and we'll see it in a later slide. Because if you said there are humans and apes, then that would be fair, right? It just depends on if you want to split up the apes, because like you could say humans and apes, or you could say humans and chimps and gorillas and orangutans, and that would be 4 different things.
Right.
Yeah. So he really was very confusing with that slide. As we mentioned, they weren't with the relative size was off. Some were larger or smaller than what they are in real life. They had different orientations. Some were whole skulls, some were fragments, some had jaws, some didn't. There was no sequence by time or by type of fossil. So it really was very confusing. I have a few more pictures, and this one is set up along an evolutionary regression. So you have several of the skulls shown, modern human, Neanderthal, Erectus, Heidelbergensis, or Gaster. Remember, these are all human descendants of Adam and Eve, right? And notice how they do kind of cluster and overlap. Habilis is over here. We've got Australopithecines in this area, and notice these 3 here, these are the Paranthropus skulls. So that one, they had several of on the chart. They had an Africanus and Afarensis, I think. But here's the problem for evolution, right? Look at the Paranthropus and the Australopithecines. These all overlap too, okay? So which one are we descendant from? They can't tell. And it's further complicated by, if you look at where the Erectus and the Gaster are, in terms of, now these are the evolution dates in millions of years, we've got our Gaster that we find in the same level as Paranthropus and Australopithecus. Okay, so how can any of these be the ancestor of Erectus and Ergaster when they're overlapping in time? See, what's happened is as they have found more human fossils, it's caused them more problems because they don't have the nice progression that they once did because of the overlap. So we not only have the humans overlapping in time, but we have humans overlapping in time with our alleged ancestor. I made this chart, but I took off the dashed lines. I took off the connectors and arranged them in groups. And when you do that, right, you can see how we've got similarities and a range of variation. And so I do think these represent a real group. So it's also why I will get 5 types from Nye's chart. And I'll tell you where I got inspired to arrange the groups like this. It was from the Smithsonian website, because the Smithsonian website had this tree, and they had them clustered in groups. And see how they've got the tree branches that connect? There's no data on those branches. They've just kind of drawn the line. And so you might as well draw the lines like this, where they're all separate, non-related kinds. Or we could go back and cluster them like this. It's kind of showing the same thing. See, I haven't really changed it. Well, I took out the Rudolph census, and I took out the Rudolph census that was there. But we're not moving the main types there. Also, shortly after the Nye debate, I went up to the Smithsonian Museum. I take my Creation Studies 390 class up there every year. And I took this picture that they had in one of the displays because what I saw was they have, from the Smithsonian, they have humans and they have everybody else. And so I kind of wanted to send this picture to Bill Nye and say that he should go to the Smithsonian if he wants to get clarification. Humans and everybody else. So they're humans and apes. And we can take some questions if we don't have some already.
So I already have some questions that students had sent me, and if anyone else has questions, you can either use the chat box to send them to me, or you can email them now, and I'll have them in my email. And they can either be questions on Dr. DeWitt's presentation now or something else from the course as well. So the first question we have, Dr. DeWitt, is actually on human origins. And so the student asks, you explained that in Scripture there is only one race, the human race. You also explained that UV versus skin reflectance, but how do you explain that there are different phenotypes among people, Chinese, African American, Indian, and Hispanic, also short people, taller people? How can there be so much variation if every human being came from Adam and Eve?
That's because there is built-in variation. So if you take any two parents, no matter how many children they have, they will all have some slight differences. And some may be very, very different. One of my favorite examples is the couple that had one child that was very dark skinned and the other that was very light. And that's even happened in a case of fraternal twins. So if the parents have mixed race ancestry, then the children can be actually it can come out come out different. So the picture I saw of one case, the one child was darker than both parents, and the other child was lighter than both parents. And because of crossing over and just the different traits we can have for hair color and eye color and all of the different genes involved in those, that's how we get all of the variation.
So you're saying that Adam and Eve had the DNA to make someone that was Asian or Hispanic or very European looking. So they had all of that same DNA, but different groups of people became almost isolated, and so certain genetic traits became more dominant.
Right, and so some of them can be from mutations that have cropped up since. So like red hair is a recent mutation, for example. So they may not have had the gene for red hair. There's a tribe in Africa, the Mandiri tribe. These individuals have very dark skin, but they have narrow almond-shaped eyes like Asians do, and that's an unexpected combination, but helps us to see how the genes after the Tower of Babel got concentrated in particular areas.
Right, and I think something that we don't think about now, but in the not too distant past, it wasn't as easy to travel over different areas of the world. So you didn't have people meeting people from other groups. Like someone from China might never make it to North America or to Europe because of the distance and how difficult it would be to travel there. So the groups tended to stay isolated.
Right, and one thing that happens is if you look at the most extreme differences in the human population, they're the most geographically distant. So if you took someone, tribal African versus South Vietnam versus Finland, these people would look as different as any, still be able to interbreed, but it's because they're on the fringes geographically.
Right. So partly related to this, the next question from the same student is, have you ever contemplated the possibility that God made other couples simultaneously in other places of the earth, but that God chose Adam and Eve to work with them as he has chosen other people throughout the Old Testament and New Testament?
Absolutely not. That's not consistent with Scripture. As in Genesis 1 and 2, God made Adam and Eve directly, and it must be the case in terms of salvation, right? If we have an inherited sin nature, we're getting it from Adam. All humans are getting our sin nature inherited from Adam. That's a biblical necessity.
So Adam and Eve had to be the only couple that was created in the beginning.
Right, and Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living.
Right, so everyone came from Adam and Eve. No, there weren't any other people that were created, because if there were, then maybe there would be people that didn't have a sin nature.
Correct.
Okay.
And we have nothing from Scripture that would tell us otherwise. And say for Adam, right, God marched all the animals by. There was no one suitable for him. right? So if there was some other woman that was somewhere, right, that wouldn't make sense.
Right. And so, and that's confirmed several places in the New Testament. We are shown that we have other examples of Jesus confirming or apostles confirming the Old Testament of actual history.
Right, because Paul refers back to Adam in Acts 17 and elsewhere when he talks about the woman. You have Jesus from the beginning, the Creator made them male and female. He said in Mark and in Matthew, and yeah.
It's good to know that we can trust God's word.
Absolutely, 100%.
So we don't have any more questions on human origins, and I didn't receive any other questions from, oh, here, yes, I did receive another question from a student. Okay, so the question is, do you think that pointing out limitations and problems with dating methods remains an effective strategy for us to use when engaging evolutionists, given that so many people have accepted the data as accurate?
When I'm discussing human origins, I am fine with using the evolutionist dates to show the problems. So I brought that up in the discussion just as a reminder because I was using a million years and stuff, so I don't want people to be confused about where I'm coming from. But it's not necessary to go into the dating methods to show the problems with human origins from an evolution perspective. I think it's better if you don't. If you're using their own dates and show the confusion and the conflict, that's where I would focus the discussion.
I think with human origins that there's a lot more that you can discuss other than just what the claimed age is of the fossils as well.
Right. So it's a separate issue, and if you can if you can take their assumptions and show that their system falls apart using their dating methods, then I don't have to show that their dating methods are flawed.
Right. Well, what do you think about when you're speaking to people not about necessarily the age of hominid fossils, just about people that believe the Earth is old and they use a lot of evidence from dates of rocks and geology? Do you think and people there's so much acceptance of these dates, and sometimes if you say, well, dating methods may not be accurate, people kind of say, you're crazy. So what would you say about, do you think there are other methods we should use or approach, or do you think it still is a good method to talk about problems with dating methods?
It's not where I'm going to go first.
Where would you start?
Not because there aren't problems with the dating methods. It's because you end up in a big quagmire and you miss the big point. See, to me, the most critical point of all is that all humans are descendants of Adam and Eve, as that's critical for the fall also being a real historic event and giving the foundation and reason for Christ coming and paying the penalty and redeeming us. So that those are connected. And if I had a discussion even today with someone who was kind of leaning toward old Earth, but what happens is if you're an old Earth person and you believe in Adam and Eve, then I've kind of got you in a corner. Because if Adam and Eve are real people, you have to put them in a historic timeline. They have to be at a point in history. and then you say when. Okay, and were they directly created, or did they have parents? If they had parents, did their parents sin? Did their parents have a sin nature? You end up in a bit of a quandary that really is most parsimoniously solved by a straight young earth perspective. But you're not going to, for an evolutionist, you're not going to get them to just hook on to Adam and Eve like that. It's going to take more. So when I've given presentation on human origins, and it was several atheists were there, and when he was a professor, he came up at the end and he says, you've made a compelling case that human anthropology is a mess, and I agree with you 100%, but I don't accept the conclusion that creation's true. So he just wasn't there yet.
Right. That's a big jump to make, and that partly comes from what your worldview is. It's hard to conclude something if you're still holding on to that worldview.
Right. And so for someone like that, right, if I can just show him that, the evolution case for human origins really falls apart. Well, if you lose that, your alternative is, well, maybe they'll figure it out, or maybe there really is an Adam and Eve. You're kind of left with those two options, because what they have right now is a mess.
Right. So it seems like when we're speaking with someone about creation and evolution, we really need to use a lot of wisdom on where we start with them and where we go, because different people are coming from different places. And so if you can understand what their worldview is, then you have a better idea of where to start with them in speaking with them about the issues.
Right, and we have to remember, right, the point is to help them understand the gospel first and foremost.
Right.
And I don't get there with radiometric dating. I really don't. So it's more critical to help them understand salvation, fall, and Adam as a real person. And then not worry about the dating after that.
Right. That's a really good point. We need to stay focused on what the really important goal is when we're speaking with people.
Right, because I can believe that the dating methods are flawed and go to hell.
Right.
So just focusing on the dating methods doesn't help someone come to Christ.
Right. That's a great point, Dr. DeWitt. Okay, I don't see any more questions that have come through. So if we don't have any more questions, we're going to end our session. If students are interested in a review of, a more complete review of the material from the course, we'll be sending out that link for the review session this week. So thank you everyone for coming. We'll look forward to our next synchronous moment next term. Thanks, Dr. DeWitt, for leading our discussion tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.